Please like and subscribe to the channel if you find this video interesting and useful. Give me more ideas you want me to make. Enjoy watching the video. The air in Uncle Zeke's workshop always hung thick with the scent of ancient dust, forgotten spices, and the faint, metallic tang of things long buried. For Kirk, it was a smell that evoked both wonder and a creeping unease. He'd spent countless childhood afternoons among the chaotic stacks of maps, archaeological journals, and peculiar artifacts that filled the small, cluttered space behind Zeke's crumbling coastal cottage. His uncle, a man whose eyes held the permanent glint of far-off horizons and whose hands were calloused from a lifetime of digging, had always been a figure of fascination. But lately, Kirk felt a different kind of pull, a gravitational force emanating from a specific, unassuming object. It was a stone, roughly the size of a pigeon's egg, obsidian black, yet catching the light with an unnerving, iridescent sheen. It wasn't smooth, but subtly faceted, as if shaped by a geological process alien to Earth, or perhaps by hands that predated human history. Zeke kept it in a tarnished silver box, tucked away in a drawer he usually guarded with the ferocity of a dragon. But a few weeks ago, after a particularly potent rum and a rambling monologue about the folly of man's hubris, Zeke had left the drawer ajar. Kirk, pretending to search for a misplaced wrench, had seen it. The first time he touched it, a jolt, not unlike static electricity, but far deeper, had shot through his arm. It wasn't painful, more like a sudden, internal shift, a momentary disorientation. He'd quickly pulled his hand back, chalking it up to nerves and the odd atmosphere of the workshop. But the stone had lodged itself in his mind. Uncle Zeke had found it on his last, ill-fated expedition to the remote, unmapped regions of the Yucatan. The expedition had been shrouded in mystery, even for Zeke. He'd returned haggard, gaunt, and with a tremor in his hands that wasn't solely from age. His crew, he'd muttered darkly, had simply vanished. One by one. The jungle, he'd claimed, had swallowed them whole, leaving only the oppressive silence and the strange, inexplicable phenomena that had driven him to abandon the dig. He'd never elaborated, only hinted at things that defy explanation and a power best left undisturbed. He'd brought back only a handful of artifacts, the black stone among them, which he'd subsequently locked away with an almost superstitious reverence. Kirk, then a cynical anthropology student, had dismissed it as the ramblings of an old man whose mind had been addled by tropical fevers and isolation. But as he spent more time around Zeke, noticing the way his uncle sometimes clutched his chest when looking at the stone's hiding place, or the whispered nightmares that escaped his lips on particularly windy nights, Kirk's skepticism began to fray. One drizzly Tuesday, with Zeke out on one of his rare trips to the antique market, Kirk found himself alone in the workshop. The curiosity had become an itch he couldn't scratch. He walked to the drawer, his heart hammering against his ribs. He pulled it open. The silver box glinted faintly in the dim light. Inside, resting on a bed of faded velvet, lay the stone. It seemed to hum with a silent energy, drawing him closer. He reached out, his fingers trembling slightly. This time, he didn't snatch his hand back. As his skin made contact with the cool, smooth surface, the world tilted. It wasn't just a jolt, it was a profound, instantaneous inversion. The air around him shimmered, then solidified into an alien texture. He felt a dizzying pressure, as if his very essence was being squeezed through a narrow aperture. When the sensation subsided, Kirk found himself staring at his own hands, but they weren't his. They were smaller, more delicate, with manicured nails and a faint scar on the left index finger he didn't recognize. He glanced down. His chest was unfamiliar, softer, more yielding. He felt a strange lightness in his limbs, a different center of gravity. He looked wildly around the workshop. Everything was the same, yet profoundly different, seen from a slightly lower vantage point. A choked gasp escaped his lips, but it wasn't his voice. It was higher, more melodic, laced with a bewildered fear. He stumbled to a dusty mirror propped against a stack of crates. Staring back at him was Maxine, his girlfriend, Maxine. Her vibrant red hair was a little disheveled, her usually confident blue eyes wide with a terror that mirrored his own. Across the room, collapsed beside the workbench, lay his own body, unconscious. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't looking at Maxine. He was Maxine. And Maxine was currently inhabiting his own inert form. The stone, still clutched in his hand, pulsed with a faint, internal light. Panic surged, cold and sharp. He tried to speak, but the words felt foreign in this new mouth. What happened? The high-pitched voice whispered. As if on cue, his own body stirred. Maxine, in Kirk's form, groaned, her eyes fluttering open. She sat up slowly, looking at her new hands, then down at the breadth of her new chest. Her gaze finally landed on him, or rather, on Maxine's body, which he now inhabited. A primal scream tore from her throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated horror. Kirk, trapped in Maxine's form, could only stare back, equally terrified, equally bewildered. The stone, it seemed, had chosen him, and it had revealed its secret in the most shocking way imaginable. This wasn't just an artifact, it was a catalyst, a key to an impossible exchange. And in that moment of utter disorientation, a new, unsettling curiosity began to bloom amidst the fear. What else could this stone do? What other secrets did it hold? The expedition's curse suddenly felt terrifyingly real, and Kirk knew, with a chilling certainty, that his life and Maxine's would never be the same. The stone had woven itself into their fates, and its threads were already pulling taut. The initial shock of the swap had eventually given way to a bizarre, almost hysterical laughter, followed by a torrent of panicked questions. Maxine, now trapped in Kirk's muscular frame, had been the first to recover her composure, albeit barely. Her mind, usually so sharp and analytical, struggled to process the impossible. Okay, deep breaths, she'd instructed, her own voice rumbling uncharacteristically from Kirk's throat. What just happened? And how do we fix it? Kirk, gazing at his own reflection in the dusty mirror, found himself experiencing a kaleidoscope of emotions. Fear, yes, but also an undeniable thrill, a frisson of the unknown. The stone, he'd managed to articulate, his voice now Maxine's. It must have done this. Uncle Zeke, he warned me it was powerful. They experimented cautiously. They touched the stone together, separately, held it, dropped it. Nothing. The swap seemed permanent. For hours, they stumbled around the workshop, each trying to navigate the unfamiliar contours of the other's body. Kirk, in Maxine's form, found himself acutely aware of the delicate curve of her spine, the swing of her hips, the unexpected lightness of her stride. He found her clothes, a comfortable pair of jeans and a soft cotton shirt, strangely confining yet also liberating. He felt a peculiar connection to her, a heightened sense of empathy he hadn't anticipated. Every sensation, every movement, was a revelation. He noticed how people stared, not at him, but at her, a phenomenon he dismissed as trivial when he was just Kirk. Now he felt the weight of that gaze, the subtle judgments and appraisals. Maxine, on the other hand, felt a surge of claustrophobia. Kirk's body, with its broader shoulders and deeper chest, felt cumbersome, almost like a suit of armor. She missed the agility and grace of her own form. His clothes hung differently, felt heavier. Even his scent, a familiar comfort before, now felt alien clinging to her new skin. But beneath the discomfort, a flicker of mischievous curiosity ignited. She found herself standing taller, feeling a strange surge of protective strength, an almost primal sense of power she'd never known. She flexed Kirk's biceps, marveling at the ripple of muscle. "Wow," she muttered, "you really do work out, don't you?" Days bled into a week of careful deception. They concocted a story for their friends and family, an urgent, mysterious research trip for Maxine, and Kirk simply being busy. They communicated constantly, texting each other from their respective new bodies, often with hilarious and sometimes embarrassing results. Kirk learned the intricacies of Maxine's morning routine, the specific brand of conditioner she used, the subtle art of applying eyeliner. Maxine discovered the surprisingly complex process of shaving a beard, the weight of Kirk's work boots, and the incessant cravings for a good craft beer. One evening, after another day of narrowly avoiding detection, they sat on Kirk's couch, a cautious distance between them. "We can't keep this up forever, Maxine," as Kirk sighed, running a hand through Kirk's hair, a gesture that felt unsettlingly intimate. What if we try it again? Together. Maybe we can reverse it." Kirk, as Maxine, hesitated. The thought of going back was appealing, yet a strange part of him was reluctant. He'd begun to see the world and their relationship from a completely new perspective. "What if it makes it worse?" he asked, his voice soft. "What if it makes it right?" Maxine countered, her gaze earnest. "We can't live like this, Kirk. We're losing ourselves." He finally agreed. That night, after ensuring Uncle Zeke was deep in one of his rum-induced slumbers, they returned to the workshop. The stone lay in its silver box, almost beckoning. This time, they approached it with a shared purpose, a mutual understanding of its potent magic. They sat cross-legged on the dusty floor, facing each other. The air crackled with a nervous energy. Kirk, in Maxine's body, felt a surge of adrenaline. He looked into his own eyes, now inhabited by Maxine's soul, and saw a reflection of his own fear and his own hope. "Ready?" Maxine, as Kirk, asked, her voice a low murmur. Kirk, as Maxine, nodded, a lump in his throat. Slowly, tentatively, they both reached out. Their fingers, one delicate and one broad, touched the obsidian surface simultaneously. The world exploded in a symphony of sensations. It wasn't just a tilt this time, but a violent centrifuge, a cosmic tumble. Lights flared behind Kirk's eyes, sounds became distorted echoes, and for a terrifying moment, he felt his very being stretched thin, like taffy, between two poles. He felt Maxine's essence, a rush of her memories, her emotions, her entire life force, intertwine with his own, a brief, terrifying fusion of souls. Then, just as suddenly, it ceased. Kirk opened his eyes. He was looking at his own hands again. His broad, strong hands. He touched his face, the familiar stubble, the square jaw. He stood up, feeling the comforting weight of his own body, the familiar ache in his knees from an old soccer injury. He let out a shaky breath. "It worked," he whispered, his own voice sounding impossibly deep and resonant after days of Maxine's higher register. Across from him, Maxine sat up, shaking her head as if clearing cobwebs. Her red hair, her bright blue eyes, her slender frame. "Oh, thank God," she breathed, her voice a sweet relief. She looked at him, a wide, relieved smile spreading across her face. They embraced then, a desperate, joyful hug. But as their bodies met, a strange tension lingered. It wasn't just relief. Something had changed. Kirk felt a subtle shift within him, a lingering echo of Maxine's presence, a new sensitivity, a heightened emotional awareness. And when he looked at Maxine, he saw a different fire in her eyes, a newfound boldness, a subtle shift in her posture, almost an echo of his own swagger. The swap had been reversed, but the exchange had left an indelible mark. They had walked in each other's shoes, seen the world through each other's eyes, felt the world through each other's skin. It had been awkward, humorous, terrifying, and profoundly sensual. It had blurred the lines of their individual identities, leaving them with a connection deeper and more complex than before. "We have to be careful with this thing," Maxine said, her voice serious, her gaze fixed on the innocent-looking stone. "It's powerful." Kirk nodded, still feeling the phantom sensations of Maxine's body. He knew then, with a sinking certainty, that this wouldn't be the last time they would touch the stone. The curiosity, the lure of the ultimate intimate experience, was too strong to resist. The stone had offered them a forbidden fruit, and they had tasted it. And the taste, though tinged with fear, was undeniably intoxicating. The boundaries of their love and their selves had been irrevocably expanded. The decision to use the stone again wasn't a casual one. It was born from a heady mix of intoxicating curiosity and a strange, almost spiritual craving for the unique intimacy it offered. After their first successful reversal, Kirk and Maxine found themselves drawn to the artifact with an undeniable pull. They began to use it selectively, cautiously, at first just to experience each other's perspectives for a few hours, to truly understand the nuances of the other's day. A client meeting for Kirk, a tough yoga session for Maxine. Each swap deepened their connection, blurring the lines of their individual selves, weaving their experiences into a shared tapestry. It became their secret ritual, a forbidden fruit that added an electric charge to their already passionate relationship. They kept the stone hidden in a small, locked chest under their bed, far from Uncle Zeke's workshop, believing they had mastered its use. They were careful, meticulous, always ensuring they were alone when they activated it, always reversing the exchange before anyone could notice. One particular weekend, they decided to indulge their shared fantasy more fully. Maxine had a conference in Santa Barbara, a swanky beachfront hotel offering an escape from their usual routine. Kirk decided to join her, turning it into a romantic getaway. They packed light, the stone tucked discreetly into Maxine's overnight bag, a clandestine companion to their illicit adventure. The hotel was a symphony of understated luxury, hushed marble lobbies, the scent of fresh orchids, and the distant, soothing murmur of the Pacific. Their room on the 5th floor offered a panoramic view of the ocean, the sunset painting the sky in fiery hues. After dinner and a few glasses of wine, the mood was ripe for their unique brand of intimacy. "Tonight," Kirk whispered as they stood on the balcony, watching the last sliver of sun dip below the horizon, "let's not just observe. Let's live." Maxine turned to him, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "You mean a full night?" He nodded, pulling the small chest from her bag. The obsidian stone seemed to absorb the fading light, its surface gleaming with an inner fire. "A full night. Just us. In each other's skin." They performed the ritual with practiced ease. Sitting on the plush hotel bed, they touched the stone together. The familiar disorientation, the sudden rush of sensations, the feeling of their souls intertwining, it was still intense, but now tinged with a delicious anticipation. When it was over, Kirk found himself once again in Maxine's body and Maxine in his. The night unfolded in a haze of wonder and discovery. They explored the boundaries of their swapped forms, laughing at the awkwardness, reveling in the new sensations. Kirk, in Maxine's body, felt a profound appreciation for the softness of her skin, the delicate curves, the subtle strength in her limbs. He found himself looking at the world with a new sensitivity, experiencing beauty and sensation with an almost raw intensity. Maxine, in Kirk's body, relished the broad shoulders, the deep voice, the undeniable sense of physical power. She found herself moving with a newfound confidence, a swagger she hadn't possessed before. It was a night of profound connection, an ultimate expression of their love and trust. As the first light of dawn painted the sky in gentle pastels, they lay tangled in the luxurious sheets, exhausted but exhilarated. "We should switch back," Maxine, as Kirk, murmured, her voice husky with sleep and satisfaction. Before the conference. Kirk, as Maxine, nodded, a pang of reluctance echoing in his chest. He was growing accustomed to this. Almost too accustomed. He reached for the small chest on the bedside table. His hand closed around empty air. His eyes snapped open fully. The chest was open, the velvet lining exposed. Empty. A jolt of icy fear shot through him. "Maxine," he whispered, his voice trembling in her throat. "The stone. It's gone." Maxine, as Kirk, sat bolt upright, her sleepy contentment instantly replaced by stark terror. "What? No. It can't be." She scrambled out of bed, her new frame moving with clumsy urgency, and began tearing through their bags, throwing clothes onto the floor. Kirk joined her, frantically searching every corner of the opulent room. Under the bed, in the bathroom, behind the curtains. Nothing. The stone, their secret, their incredible, dangerous secret, was gone. A cold dread began to creep in. This wasn't just a misplaced item. The chest had been locked. It had to have been stolen. But who knew? Who could possibly know about the stone, let alone its power? Kirk's mind flashed back to a fleeting moment in the lobby, earlier that evening. As they were checking in, a figure had caught his eye. A man, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, sitting alone in a plush armchair, ostensibly reading a newspaper. But Kirk had felt a prickle of unease then. Something about the man's posture, his intense, almost predatory stillness, had registered subliminally. He dismissed it as an overactive imagination, an artifact of his uncle's wild tales. Now, the image returned with chilling clarity. The man had had an angular, hawkish face, with eyes that seemed to miss nothing. And he had been looking directly at them. Or rather, at Maxine's bag, which Kirk had been holding. He didn't know why, but a name surfaced from the depths of his memory. A name Uncle Zeke had cursed on multiple occasions, a rival archaeologist, known for his unscrupulous methods and obsessive pursuit of ancient artifacts. Dr. Elias Thorne. Someone knows, Kirk, as Maxine, breathed, his voice barely audible. Someone knew we had it. Someone followed us. Maxine, as Kirk, stood in the middle of the ransacked room, her, face pale. The playful intimacy of the night had vanished, replaced by a terrifying vulnerability. Not only was the stone gone, but they were still in each other's bodies. And now they had no way to reverse the exchange. The playful exploration had become a trap, an irreversible consequence. The ultimate secret was now exposed, and they were utterly, terrifyingly stuck. The distant murmur of the ocean suddenly sounded less soothing and more like a vast, indifferent roar. Their lives, they both knew with a sickening certainty, had just taken an irreversible turn. The days that followed the theft of the stone were a blur of escalating panic and surreal adjustment. Trapped in each other's bodies, Kirk and Maxine quickly realized the profound, life-altering implications of their predicament. They couldn't simply go home and pretend everything was normal. Their lives were meticulously intertwined, yet distinctly separate, and now those distinctions were violently blurred. Maxine, now inhabiting Kirk's larger, more imposing frame, felt a suffocating sense of loss. She missed the familiarity of her own body, the specific way her hair fell, the curve of her waist. She found Kirk's rugged features a constant, jarring reminder that she wasn't herself. His deeper voice felt unnatural coming from her, and she constantly had to consciously adjust her mannerisms to avoid looking feminine in Kirk's body, a subtle but exhausting performance. She found herself hyper-aware of his lingering scent, the way his muscles bunched, even his specific posture. The initial thrill of experiencing male strength had evaporated, replaced by a deep-seated frustration. On the other hand, Kirk, now inhabiting Maxine's lithe form, found himself strangely adapting. The initial disorientation had given way to a burgeoning sense of freedom. He'd always been a somewhat serious, introspective person, burdened by his family's expectations and his uncle's eccentricities. In Maxine's body, he felt lighter, less constrained. He found a strange joy in her vibrant clothes, the expressive gestures she instinctively used, even the way people reacted to her. Maxine was a force of nature, confident, charming, effortlessly engaging. Kirk, living as her, found himself shedding some of his own inhibitions, embracing a more vivacious persona. The first few weeks were a comedy of errors. Maxine, attempting to navigate Kirk's engineering job, found herself completely out of her depth. Technical jargon she'd never heard, complex diagrams she couldn't decipher. She bluffed her way through meetings, relying on Kirk's frantic, whispered instructions through a hidden earpiece, but the stress was immense. She felt like an imposter, constantly on the verge of exposure. Her colleagues noticed the shift. Kirk was suddenly more reserved, less confident, prone to nervous fidgeting. "Rough patch, Kirk," his boss had asked, a concerned frown on his face. Kirk, meanwhile, was excelling in Maxine's role as a marketing executive. He found her world exhilarating. He enjoyed the fast-paced environment, the creative challenges, the social interactions. He was a quick study, absorbing Maxine's knowledge and adding his own analytical twist. He found himself more assertive in client pitches, more charismatic in presentations. Maxine's colleagues remarked on her newfound edge, her strategic focus. They saw it as a promotion-worthy transformation. Kirk found himself reveling in the praise, in the feeling of being competent and admired in a way he hadn't quite experienced in his own life. He even started picking up Maxine's old hobbies, joining her yoga class, much to his initial amusement, then genuine enjoyment, and discovering a hidden talent for abstract painting. But as 2 months dragged on, the cracks in their shared existence began to show. For Maxine, the charade was becoming unbearable. The constant vigilance, the fear of slipping up, the crushing weight of living someone else's life, all while knowing her own body was being lived in by someone else, began to take a severe toll. She felt herself slowly dissolving, her identity eroding. "I can't do this anymore, Kirk," she confessed one night, her voice low and raw, the unfamiliar resonance of his own chest making the words even more painful. "I feel like I'm disappearing. This isn't me. This is your life. Your body. I want my own life back." Kirk, seated opposite her, felt a jolt of guilt, but also a flash of defensiveness. He'd been enjoying this. More than enjoying it, he was thriving. He saw the pain in his eyes, the genuine anguish in his face, but a part of him felt a stubborn resistance to letting go of this new, vibrant self he had discovered. "Maxine, I know it's hard," Kirk, as Maxine, said, his voice soft, almost pleading. "But we're looking for the stone, remember? We'll get it back. We just have to survive until then." Survive? Maxine, as Kirk, scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping him. "This isn't surviving, Kirk, it's suffocating. I'm losing my mind. Every day is a performance. I feel like a ghost in your skin." She pounded Kirk's fist on the table, a sound that made Kirk, as Maxine, flinch. "And you seem to be having the time of your life. You're getting promotions, everyone loves Maxine. Don't you miss being you?" The question hung in the air, thick with accusation. Kirk hesitated. He did miss his own life, in a way. He missed his specific intellectual pursuits, his comfort in his own skin. But he couldn't deny the exhilarating sense of renewal he'd found. He'd become a better version of himself, through Maxine. "Of course I miss my life," Kirk, as Maxine, lied, the words feeling false even as he spoke them. "But we have to be practical. We can't fall apart. We have to keep up appearances." Maxine, as Kirk, looked at him, his eyes narrowing. "Practical? Or are you just enjoying it a little too much? Are you forgetting who you are, Kirk?" "Who I am." The emotional drift between them, once subtle, was now a chasm. The intimate understanding fostered by the swaps had curdled into resentment and suspicion. Maxine felt betrayed, her identity stolen and now, seemingly, enjoyed by the thief. Kirk felt misunderstood, his newfound confidence dismissed as a mere selfish indulgence. The constant pressure of maintaining the illusion, coupled with the profound identity crisis, was pushing them to their breaking point. Their love, once fortified by their shared secret, was now buckling under its weight. The irreversible nature of their exchange was slowly, irrevocably, tearing them apart. The tension between Kirk and Maxine became a palpable, oppressive presence in their small apartment. The shared intimacy of their body swap, once a source of wonder and connection, had curdled into a bitter irony. Maxine, inhabiting Kirk's body, grew increasingly agitated, her patience worn thin by the constant performance and the erosion of herself. She'd always been vibrant and direct. Now, trapped in Kirk's more reserved demeanor, she felt stifled, her true self screaming beneath the surface of his skin. The subtle shifts in his gait, the way he held his coffee mug, the very scent of his cologne, they were all daily tortures, constant reminders of her stolen identity. Kirk, in Maxine's body, continued to flourish. He was praised at Maxine's office, handling projects with a newfound strategic flair. He even found himself taking up Maxine's old art supplies, producing surprisingly evocative abstract pieces. He enjoyed the attention, the creative outlet, the feeling of unburdened self-expression. Yet, beneath the surface, a knot of guilt tightened with every passing day as he witnessed Maxine's despair. He knew he should be as desperate as she was to get the stone back, but a part of him, a deeply selfish, nascent part, recoiled from the thought of returning to his old life. One evening, after another tense, silent dinner, Maxine, as Kirk, confronted him. "You're not trying, are you?" she accused, her voice low and dangerous, Kirk's own timbre adding an unsettling weight to her words. "You're not actively searching for the stone. I check your browser history, your calls. You haven't contacted any of Zeke's old archaeologist friends, you haven't gone back to that hotel, you haven't done anything to find it. Why, Kirk? Why aren't you trying to get us back?" Kirk, as Maxine, flinched, caught off guard. He had indeed slowed his search, his efforts dwindling as he became more comfortable in Maxine's life. He tried to muster a defensive lie, but the desperation in his eyes was too piercing. I have been," he stammered, his voice thin in Maxine's throat. "It's just, there's been nothing. No leads. Thorne is a ghost." "Liar, Maxine," as Kirk hissed, stepping closer, her face contorted with anger. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? You're enjoying living my life. You're enjoying being me." The truth in her words stung, igniting a defensive anger in Kirk. "And what if I am?" he shot back, his composure finally cracking. "What if this isn't so bad? What if I found something I needed? This body, this life, it's not just yours anymore, Maxine. I've been living it for 2 months. A gasp escaped Maxine's lips, a sound of pure betrayal. "So, you just expect me to vanish? To cease to exist? To watch you parade around in my skin while I rot in yours?" The words hung in the air, poisoned. It was then that Kirk made his dangerous choice. The truth he had been hiding, the secret he had guarded since a hushed phone call with Uncle Zeke a month prior, threatened to burst forth. Zeke, in a rare moment of lucidity during one of his rambling calls, had mentioned something. Something about a second stone. There might be another way, Kirk, as Maxine, blurted out, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "Uncle Zeke, he thinks there might be a second stone." Maxine, as Kirk, froze, her anger momentarily replaced by a flicker of bewildered hope. "A second stone? What are you talking about? Why didn't you tell me this before?" Kirk swallowed hard. He just mentioned it, in passing. He found it years ago, another relic from the same dig. He said it was in his private collection, in a safe deposit box. He never thought it had the same properties. He called it the sibling stone. But he's been so out of it. I wasn't sure if he was just rambling. He left out the real reason for his silence, the selfish hope that if there was a second stone, he could be the one to control it, to ensure he got what he wanted, a way to keep this new life, or at least its best aspects. Maxine, as Kirk stared at him, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Hope, suspicion, and a fresh wave of hurt. "You knew," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You knew there was a possibility, and you hid it from me. For 2 months. The accusation was a hammer blow. The lie, the deceit, the underlying selfishness, was exposed. The chasm between them widened into an abyss. I was scared," Kirk, as Maxine, confessed, his voice breaking. "Scared of what it meant, scared of what we would do." "What we would do?" Maxine, as Kirk, laughed, a harsh, mirthless sound. "No, Kirk. Scared of what you would lose. Scared of losing my life." She shook her head, a tear tracing a path down Kirk's cheek. "I can't believe this. I can't believe you." The confrontation ended in heartbreak. Maxine, consumed by a cocktail of betrayal and despair, retreated into a shell of silence. She started spending more time out of the apartment, avoiding Kirk, seeking solace in long, solitary walks along the beach, staring blankly at the waves. She stopped pretending to go to Kirk's job, simply calling in sick, letting his professional life unravel. She felt utterly alone, a prisoner in a body that wasn't hers, a ghost in a life that belonged to someone else. Kirk, though finally admitting the partial truth, felt a strange mix of relief and profound loss. The vibrant spark that had once defined Maxine, even in his own body, was dimming. He watched her, in his body, waste away, becoming gaunt and withdrawn. The joy he had found in Maxine's life began to curdle into bitter ash. He knew he had pushed her too far, broken something essential between them. And now, armed with the knowledge of a possible second stone, a dangerous choice presented itself. Find Uncle Zeke, retrieve the sibling stone, and force a resolution. But what kind of resolution? And for whom? The game had changed, and the stakes had just become deadly. The revelation of a potential second stone had ignited a flicker of hope in Maxine, swiftly extinguished by the crushing weight of Kirk's betrayal. The trust between them, once the bedrock of their extraordinary bond, had shattered. Maxine, inhabiting Kirk's body, felt a profound, aching emptiness. She spent her days adrift, the powerful frame she wore feeling like a cage. Kirk, in Maxine's body, was haunted by his deception, the joy he'd found in her life now tainted by guilt. He knew he had to act, not just for Maxine, but to reclaim a piece of himself that felt increasingly lost in the opulent, yet hollow, shell of her identity. Driven by a desperate need for answers and a burgeoning sense of urgency, Kirk, as Maxine, sought out Uncle Zeke. He found him in his cluttered workshop, surrounded by more new artifacts, dusty relics from recent estate sales, each whispering its own forgotten story. Zeke, his eyes clouded with rum and age, looked up as Kirk entered. He squinted, took a long swig from a hip flask, and motioned for Maxine to sit. "Maxine, is it?" Zeke rasped, a knowing glint in his watery eyes. "Or is it my nephew playing dress-up again?" Kirk, as Maxine, froze. You know." Zeke let out a dry, rattling chuckle. "No? Boy, I've seen things you couldn't imagine. My expedition to the Yucatan, that wasn't just a dig for relics. That was an encounter with forces far older, far more potent than any of us understood. Those stones, they have a name, a history." He tapped a thick, leather-bound journal with a gnarled finger. "The Olmen, they called them Corazon Dividido, divided heart. Or sometimes, Los Gemelos Eternos, the eternal twins." Kirk's heart hammered in Maxine's chest. "The second stone, the sibling stone. You said you had another one." Zeke nodded slowly, his gaze turning distant, fixed on some unseen horror in the past. I found two. Thought they were just ceremonial. One, the Corazon Oscuro, the dark heart, the one you foolishly meddled with. The other, the Corazon Brillante, the bright heart. I kept it separate, never suspecting its true nature. Locked it away, in a bank vault, far from here." "Its true nature?" Kirk pressed, sensing a deeper, darker truth emerging. Zeke sighed, a shudder passing through his gaunt frame. The Olmen were a people obsessed with balance, with consequence. They believed that betrayal, particularly among lovers or kin, was the gravest sin. So, their priests, their shamans, they crafted these stones. Not as a gift, but as a punishment. He paused, taking another slow drink. The legend says, the first time two individuals use one of the divided heartstones, their souls become entwined. Not just their bodies, mind you, but their very essences. They experience each other, yes. They learn. But with each subsequent use, the bond deepens. Parts of each person's soul, their memories, their desires, their very identity, begin to permanently merge with the other. Even if you swap back, you're not entirely yourselves anymore. You carry pieces of the other within you. It's a curse, boy. A slow, insidious erosion of the self, a punishment for playing with the sacred boundaries of identity. Kirk, as Maxine, felt a cold dread spread through his veins. The lingering echoes of Maxine's sensitivity he'd felt in his own body, the newfound boldness Maxine had in his, it wasn't just a memory. It was a piece of her imprinted on his soul. And he, a piece of him, imprinted on hers. "So, when we swap back," Kirk began, his voice barely a whisper. "You'll still carry the other," Zeke finished, his voice grim. "A little more each time. A little less of yourself. It's why I came back alone from the Yucatan. My crew, they tried to use it to settle a dispute. Became so intertwined they couldn't tell themselves apart. Descended into madness. The jungle simply reclaimed bodies that no longer knew whose they were. But the second stone, Kirk insisted, desperate for a solution. The bright heart. Can it reverse it? Can it sever the connection?" Zeke shook his head slowly. "The legends say the bright heart doesn't simply swap. It absorbs. It was designed to consume the fractured essences of those corrupted by the dark heart, to bring them back to a single, pure form. But it's dangerous, Kirk. Untested. It requires immense spiritual focus, a pure intent. And it only works once. One final, definitive exchange. Kirk's mind reeled. This wasn't just about getting their bodies back, it was about reclaiming their very souls. And with each use of the dark heart, they had compounded the curse. His enjoyment of Maxine's life, his subtle changes, her dwindling self, it was all part of the insidious merging. The true horror of the stone's power settled upon him, chilling him to the bone. He now understood the true weight of his deception, the depth of his selfishness. He hadn't just stolen Maxine's body, he had stolen fragments of her soul. He had allowed this curse to deepen, putting both of them at risk of losing themselves entirely. He had to find that second stone. He had to make things right. But with Thorn out there, and Maxine utterly broken, the path ahead seemed fraught with peril. The horrifying truth revealed by Uncle Zeke, that each swap with the Dark Heart Stone had irrevocably merged fragments of their souls, hit Kirk like a physical blow. His guilt intensified, a heavy, suffocating blanket. He hadn't just inhabited Maxine's body, he had unknowingly stolen pieces of her very essence, while she, in his body, was slowly losing herself to the encroaching fragments of him. The revelation about the bright heart, the potential cure, was a fragile hope, a single flickering candle in a storm. But first, he needed to find it, and he needed Maxine to be willing to try. He returned to the apartment, desperate to share what he'd learned, to make amends. But the apartment was silent, eerily so. Maxine, as Kirk, was gone. Her sparse belongings were still there, but a note lay on the kitchen counter, hastily scrawled in what was unmistakably Maxine's agitated handwriting, yet signed with Kirk's name. "I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving. Find me when you remember who you are. Or don't. Maybe it's better this way." A cold wave of panic washed over Kirk, as Maxine. She hadn't just left, she had taken his body, his life, with her. The casual disregard for his identity, the desperate plea for hers, echoed in the harsh finality of the note. He tried calling her, his own phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She had cut him off completely. A frantic race against time began. Kirk, as Maxine, immediately called Uncle Zeke. "The bright heart," he pleaded, "where is it?" "Maxine's gone. She took my body, and we need that stone now more than ever." Zeke, however, was unreachable. His phone went straight to voicemail, and when Kirk rushed to the workshop, it was locked, the windows dark. A neighbor, watering hydrangeas, mentioned seeing Zeke pack a dusty old camper van a few days prior, muttering about unavoidable journeys and ancient prophecies. He, too, had vanished. Kirk felt a visceral fear. The dark heart was stolen, Maxine was gone, Zeke had disappeared, and the only known path to their salvation, the bright heartstone, was in a bank vault, location unknown, guarded by a man who had now seemingly abandoned him. Using Maxine's phone, his own phone was with her, Kirk accessed Zeke's digital files, a labyrinthine collection of scanned journals, cryptic maps, and archaeological records. Days blurred into nights as he sifted through the digital detritus of his uncle's life, fueled by caffeine and pure adrenaline. He discovered faint references to the bank where Zeke kept his emergency funds and valuable curiosities, a small, independent bank in a forgotten town in rural Arizona. The clue was tenuous, a breadcrumb almost lost in the digital wilderness, but it was all he had. Without hesitation, Kirk, as Maxine, packed a small bag. He had to find Maxine, and he had to find the bright heart. This wasn't just about survival, it was about redemption. He rented a nondescript car, using Maxine's credit cards and driver's license, and began a desperate road trip across state lines. The drive was a solitary, grueling ordeal. Every mile deepened his resolve, but also his anxiety. He saw billboards, gas stations, diners, all through Maxine's eyes, a world that was both familiar and profoundly alien. He worried constantly about Maxine, in his body, picturing her wandering aimlessly, succumbing to despair, or worse, making some rash decision that would endanger them both. He also worried about Thorn, the thief. What if Thorn had used the dark heart on someone else? What if he was actively seeking out the bright heart too, perhaps to unleash its power for his own nefarious purposes? As he drove through the desolate Arizona landscape, the red rock formations looming like ancient sentinels, Kirk, as Maxine, finally reached the small, dusty town of Redemption Creek. The bank was a quaint, brick building on Main Street. With Maxine's ID and his knowledge of Zeke's quirky financial habits, he managed to access Zeke's safe deposit box. Inside, nestled in a small, velvet pouch, lay a stone. It was similar in size and shape to the dark heart, but instead of obsidian black, it shimmered with an inner luminescence, a soft, warm, almost pearlescent glow. The bright heart. He clutched it, a surge of relief mixed with profound trepidation. This was their last chance. As he was leaving the bank, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Across the street, a dark, sleek car was parked, its tinted windows obscuring the driver. But as Kirk, as Maxine, watched, the passenger's side window slowly rolled down. And for a fleeting moment, he saw him, Dr. Elias Thorne. The hawkish face, the piercing, intelligent eyes. And in his hand, held carelessly, was the dark heart stone, its black surface gleaming menacingly in the harsh desert sun. Thorne offered a slow, predatory smile. He knew. He had followed him. He knew Kirk, as Maxine, had the bright heart. The hunter had become the hunted. And the final, terrifying confrontation was now inevitable. Kirk's heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat in Maxine's chest. He had found the key, but the battle for their souls had just truly begun. The desert wind howled around the desolate, sun-baked landscape of Redemption Creek, mirroring the tempest raging within Kirk, as Maxine. Thorne's predatory smile, the glint of the dark heart in his hand, confirmed Kirk's worst fears. The race wasn't just to find the bright heart, it was to keep it from falling into the wrong hands. Thorne, the ultimate opportunist, now had the means to wreak unimaginable havoc. Kirk, as Maxine, sped away from the bank, Thorne's sleek car hot on his heels. The pursuit was relentless, a high-stakes chase through the empty desert roads. Kirk, pushing Maxine's body and the rental car to its limits, felt a surge of adrenaline he hadn't known was possible. His mind, usually analytical, was now a vortex of instinct and desperation. He knew he couldn't outrun Thorne indefinitely. He needed a plan. He swerved off the main road, kicking up a plume of dust, heading for a cluster of ancient, weather-beaten rock formations. It was a risky move, but he remembered a section of Zeke's journals describing a hidden crevice, a natural labyrinth that might offer a chance to hide, to confront. Thorne, however, was equally cunning. He anticipated Kirk's move, his car expertly cutting off the escape route, forcing Kirk to stop in a narrow canyon, surrounded by towering red cliffs. The air was thick with dust and tension. Thorne emerged from his car, impeccably dressed even in the gritty desert, the dark heart clutched in his gloved hand. He surveyed Kirk, as Maxine, with a cold, calculating gaze. "The bright heart, I presume," he stated, his voice smooth, devoid of emotion. "A fascinating relic." The Ullmen were truly ahead of their time. Imagine, to control identity itself. "You won't get it," Kirk, as Maxine, retorted, his voice trembling slightly, but firm. He held the luminescent bright heart protectively. "Oh, but I will," Thorne countered, a faint, cruel smile touching his lips. "You see, I've been studying these stones far longer than your eccentric uncle. The dark heart causes a swap, yes. But it also has a secondary function, a resonance. I used it on a volunteer, a test subject. And I can feel the bright heart's pull, its counterpart calling to it. Just as your friend now feels a pull to yours." As if on cue, a figure emerged from Thorne's car. It was Maxine. But not the Maxine Kirk knew. She was gaunt, her eyes hollow, devoid of their usual sparkle. His clothes were disheveled, his face etched with a profound weariness. She was a ghost of her former self, a terrifying manifestation of the soul-merging curse. Maxine. Kirk, as Maxine, cried out, his heart aching with guilt and pity. Maxine, as Kirk, looked at him, a flicker of recognition in her haunted eyes, quickly replaced by a profound, vacant sorrow. Kirk, she whispered, her voice rough, hoarse. I don't know who I am anymore. Thorn chuckled, a chilling sound in the silent canyon. Exactly. The curse, as your uncle called it. But with both stones, one can not only swap but reforge. Recreate identity as one sees fit. Imagine the power. I don't just want the bright heart, Kirk. I want to understand its ultimate function. Kirk knew he had to act. This wasn't just about escaping, it was about saving Maxine, saving what little was left of their souls. He knew what he had to do. Zeke's words echoed in his mind, one final, definitive exchange. Give me the dark heart, Kirk, as Maxine said, his voice resolute. Let us finish this. We'll use both stones. Let them decide. Thorn hesitated, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. But the lure of witnessing the stone's full power was too strong. Very well, he said, tossing the dark heart stone towards Kirk. Let's see what happens when the twins reunite. Kirk caught the dark heart, his hands now holding both. The black stone seemed to throb with a sinister energy, while the white stone glowed with a desperate, hopeful light. He looked at Maxine, as Kirk, whose face was a mask of despair. This was it. Their last chance. He approached Maxine, as Kirk, holding out both stones. Maxine, he said, his voice filled with love and desperate apology. We have to do this together. Focus on who you are. Who we are. Maxine, as Kirk nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. Slowly, tentatively, they both reached out, Kirk in Maxine's body and Maxine in Kirk's. They each placed a hand on one of the stones, their fingers brushing against each other's. The canyon exploded in light. A blinding, searing white light emanated from the bright heart, clashing with the inky blackness that seemed to emanate from the dark heart. The air hummed with raw energy, a violent vortex of merging and separation. Kirk felt his soul stretched, torn, pulled in multiple directions. He felt Maxine's essence, strong yet fractured, intertwining with his own, then a sudden, immense pressure, a feeling of being compressed, distilled, into a single, pure point. Then silence. And darkness. When Kirk opened his eyes, he was lying on the dusty canyon floor. He felt different. Lighter. Stronger. He looked at his hands. They were his own. His broad, calloused, familiar hands. He sat up, feeling the comforting weight of his own body, the familiar ache in his knees. He was Kirk again. He looked around wildly. Thorn was gone, his car a distant speck disappearing over the horizon, apparently spooked by the raw power unleashed. But Maxine was there, lying a few feet away. He rushed to her side. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Her vibrant red hair, her expressive blue eyes, her delicate features, she was in her own body. Maxine. Kirk breathed, a wave of immense relief washing over him. He reached out to help her up. She looked at him, her eyes still clouded, then a slow, hesitant smile spread across her face. Kirk, she whispered, her voice her own, sweet and melodious. It worked. We're back. They embraced, a desperate, joyful hug. But as their bodies met, a strange, undeniable awareness settled over Kirk. He felt complete. More than complete. He felt an enhanced sense of clarity, a deeper emotional intelligence, a vibrant creativity he hadn't possessed before. He was Kirk, yes, but he was also more. He was Kirk with a profound, integrated understanding of Maxine. A stronger Kirk. Maxine pulled back, her eyes shining, but with a new, fierce intensity. She looked at her hands, then at Kirk, a mischievous, almost predatory glint in her gaze. It worked, she repeated, her voice confident, imbued with a subtle, resonant power. We're back. She reached out, running a hand along Kirk's jawline, a gesture that was undeniably intimate, but also carried a surprising sense of command. but I think I'm going to go get that promotion now. And maybe try my hand at some engineering challenges. Kirk stared at her, a chill creeping down his spine despite the warm desert sun. He looked into her eyes and saw not just Maxine, but a sharpened edge, a new kind of ambition, a strategic depth that was distinctly him. His analytical mind, his drive, his quiet intensity, now resided within her. He saw pieces of himself beautifully woven into the tapestry of Maxine. And then, with a jolt, he understood the final twist. The bright heart hadn't simply swapped them back. It had integrated them. Each now carried the essence of the other, not as a curse, but as a permanent, interwoven part of their being. They had returned to their own bodies, yes, but their souls were forever altered, enhanced, redefined by the intimate exchange. Kirk was Maxine's empathy, creativity, and vibrant spirit. Maxine was Kirk's intellect, drive, and quiet strength. They were no longer just Kirk and Maxine, they were Kirk and Maxine, an inseparable, transformed entity. The exchange they couldn't undo had redefined not just their relationship, but the very meaning of who they were. The question lingered, echoing in the vast desert. What truly defines self when two hearts have become eternally twinned?